broker and owner of REMAX, Philip Skuman. Are you good, Philip?
Thanks, guys, for having me. Yes, always.
You know, we talk about property all the time on Thursday when you come through. But recently, there's a conversation that we overheard. A couple that looks like they were struggling to move their property, and it's a stand-alone property. You know, and you just got us thinking that perhaps we should ask you about this. Could it have been a them issue, or is it generally difficult to move a standalone property?
So I think that's a three-pronged answer.
Okay.
Firstly, we've got to differentiate that there are freestanding houses in suburbs, no gated communities. Then you have freestanding houses within gated communities.
Oh, yes.
And then you have sectional titles.
Okay.
Okay, so and yes, also it can be a specific area, occurrence. So just to use Polokwane as an example, we are definitely finding that there is a demand for freestanding houses, suburban, outside of gated communities, but it is definitely lower than freestanding inside gated communities.
Oh, okay.
And then, so there is a definite distinction there. Then secondly, we also got to look at why sectional titles would be more in demand, and I think largely it's because of affordability. If you take a 1.5 million rand 3-bedroom townhouse, that same thing, if it was freestanding, would cost you 3 bar. So it's largely an affordability issue, because now people need to earn 100k a month to afford a 3 million rand property, whereas the median household income in Polokwane is between 35 and 45,000. So that puts us smack bam on a 1.5 as far as affordability goes. So you've definitely got a larger pool of shoppers, i.e. higher demand, when you are looking at smaller properties. Now, there's also still a demand for rural type freestanding units, and there's a lot of sales that happen there. This is your entry level properties below 1 million, just above 1 million. Those are still pumping.
Okay.
Well, it's a relative term, but there's definitely a decrease in property overall, but from a safety point of view, there's definitely an increase for gated communities freestanding.
Tell me this, do you still have, I've come across the idea or the notion that what used to be like the old suburbs that had the big yards and everything,
yes,
there'd be those that want to go in there, perhaps, do a big top billing revamp of the house. Like, if affordability was not an issue, I am like at Edwin Park. I don't know the safety element, but I look at those yards.
Perfect.
And I'm like, man.
It's a very good example.
Yeah.
There's definitely that. There's a lot of people that are looking at upgrading those type of houses, and that's definitely a price point issue as well. But to answer your question, sorry, could you just repeat that?
I was asking that if there's still a demand for that, because I know they're expensive. They're really expensive. If there's the demand for people going to old suburbs with like old properties and then buying them and maybe just revamping them.
Yeah, there's a definite trend in that, and there's also a big demand for that. But it again comes down to affordability. Your price per square, it's a better. You're going to gain more value for money buying outside of a gated community, because these properties tend to be older. They were built longer ago at a cheaper rate per square. So obviously now, if you're selling at a higher rate per square or current market value, and you are actually making profit. Whereas a lot of people are struggling to make profit on their properties if they bought it recently and if it was built quite recently. So looking back 30 years, 40 years ago, gated communities didn't exist. So most of the houses you'll buy in freestanding areas are like 40, 45, 50 years old. I'm talking they were built in the 80s, 90s. And gated communities only started coming in and becoming prevalent after that. So it comes down to what the pricing is, but the demand is there. Everybody wants it. Is can they afford it is the question. But there are different areas where it punts higher. Let's look at areas that are cash flush. People are not buying with bonds as much, like Stellenbosch, Durbanville. These areas are, Steyn City. These areas are cash flush. 60% of buyers are buying cash.
Is Broadlands cash flush? I imagined it was.
Yeah, it's not. There's not enough millionaires. and not enough new entrants to market. You know, you need fresh new millionaires to be able to buy, you know, houses like that, to create the demand, and therefore if the demand's there, the price will be higher. But that you will find that these properties do very well in those in freer standing areas like Durbanville and Stellenbosch, like I've mentioned. Polokwane, not so much, because, you know, people tend to, you know, buy with a bond, and they are heavily reliant on their incomes. It's not that they have old money.
I hear you. Can we come to the conclusion then? I mean, beginning of the year when we talked, we looked at one of the trends, the complex living being one of the things that came up as a preference. Can we say that it looks like a safer option? You mentioned affordability and the likes.
It is definitely a public perception that it is a safer option. I wouldn't necessarily say that I agree with it being safer. But there is definitely a perception like that. I mean, I spoke to a client yesterday. She owns 4 or 5 properties spread across Limpopo and Gauteng, and she wants a lock up and go in Polokwane. So, you know, there's the definite trend for that too. So people want the kind of mindset that, you know, it's locked up, it's gated, no one's going to get in there. And, you know, while I'm away, because most of these people are there maybe 2 weeks out of the month, or maybe 1 week, they use it for sleepovers when they're doing business in town. The question, to get back to the question of whether I agree with it, I think if you are vigilant, you can be quite safe, as long as you've created traffic, you know, at your stand, and people that you can trust. Because a lot of the times, we've mentioned this, crime is an internal job, especially with estates too. It can happen. Remember, the security guard now becomes your gatekeeper. And this guy can be bought because he's not earning millions. You know, if you start threatening them and, you know, saying, and that's what the syndicates do. They gather information on the security guard, then they'll sell it to the syndicate. You know, realize that it's non-violent crimes happening. People are breaking in when you're not at home. So, but there's definitely that perception, and if you're not living here, and you, to use the scenario of my client that has many properties spread across and she's never here, then I would say that it is definitely safer.
Alrighty, we'll leave it here, Philip, for today. Thank you so much for coming through. And